Welcome back to The Guardian, a law enforcement podcast. I'm your co-host, Geoffrey Grant. As always, our host, Chief Mark Ballard with the Starkville Police Department is here. Today, we are joined by Dr. Elmore-Staton, an Associate Professor of Human Development and Family Science at Mississippi State University. We would just like to thank you for being with us, Dr. Staton. We appreciate you taking the time to explore these innovative approaches that can help us be better informed when facing juvenile crime and adverse childhood experiences.
Thank you for having me today. I'm very excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. And today we will discuss a trust-based relational intervention, a system rooted in attachment theory and trauma awareness. And this is designed to meet the needs of vulnerable children. And we'll expand on what vulnerable children, the definition of that for our viewers. And also we'll be diving into Dr. Staton's project, Protect and Connect, an innovative approach that connects Mississippi parents with resources that can help promote families' health, strengthen relationships, and increase the overall family happiness of the unit.
Yeah. In this episode, our hope is to better educate everyone, including ourselves, about juvenile crime along with difference in TBRI and Protect and Connect has made, while also actively countering misinformation with evidence-based insights and real-life success stories. We will explore the core principles of TBRI, how it can be applied, and the path Dr. Staton forged in forming Protect and Connect. Whether you're a caregiver, educator, or just curious about child development, this episode is packed with insights that can make a difference in everyday encounters.
Dr. Staton, this is going to be a little bit of a difficult podcast. And the reason why I call it difficult is I'm going to try to put the relationships of some of what we're experiencing in law enforcement and how science can help. And the relationship for our average viewer who's not law enforcement, not necessarily a researcher, or into, human development, we've got to be able to make it to where our viewers are able to understand. So for me, I'm going to start off with a very real experience. I've always advocated that we need to improve our systems to where we're not losing our youth to the criminal justice system, and that means having structure, that means having less things in place to be able to catch children before they get too deep into dysfunctional habits that basically throw them to the prison system. One of the toughest days I ever had was Easter a few years ago, in which I got a call and responded to where a teenager was killed, executed by another teenager over a stolen gun. That made for difficult weeks, difficult months. Obviously, parents, everybody involved, it was very tough. And it opened up the door to really start applying, how do we ever get to that point? What are we doing wrong as the institutions that are involved? How do we ever prevent that from happening? And for me, one acronym kept coming up over and over, TBRI. Again, I've got the acronym. TBRI kept coming up, and for me, as we started preparing for this podcast and our interns, they did an amazing job on research. It kind of showed me from an institution standpoint, wow, we're missing the mark on a lot of areas there, going all the way from the talking about the attachment theory to going back from prenatal care, with going in from the time the child is born. So give our viewers, if you will, an overview. TBRI, talk to us about the scientific component, and I'll go into kind of the generational problems that we sometimes see with dealing with, children that are at risk.
Yes. So I've been doing this work for probably about 25 years now. That's going to age me. But, and one of the things that, has always been an issue of like, what is driving behavior? And one of the things that we now know that we can see in the brain and body in ways that we've never been able to before, and is that our daily interactions actually result in children's brains and bodies being wired, and how they're wired and how they grow and coordinate with each other all have to do with those interactions. So some of those interactions start, prenatally when you have mother, for instance, who may have a substance abuse problem. That's going to create some of those concerning, like the body's going to interpret that as the environment is toxic, it's dangerous, so I need to wire myself for that. In the early years, when parents don't respond to children. And I don't mean they whimper and you immediately pick them up. A response can be, way more than picking up, picking up a child. But when they cry, we actually train their brains and body to regulate themselves when we have interactions with them. So when they cry and we come to them and we're warm in our interactions with them, we're responsive by changing their diaper or feeding them or burping them, whatever that is. And we consistently meet that need. So when they cry, every time they cry, we come to them to see what they need. Their brain and body learns that, okay, it's a safe environment out there, so I can really develop in a way that is most healthy. So that's where you see, the size of the brain may be bigger. There may be greater opportunities for interactions. That child learns they're dysregulated when they cry and they're hungry, but the parent comes to them and feeds them, that regulates them. It trains their system on how they learn to regulate their behaviors later on. So all those things, even in the beginning, are really laying the foundation for how that brain and body is going to respond under stress, and, ultimately result in different types of behaviors.
Well, one of the things that the research brought out that I thought very interesting is you mentioned the wiring of the brain. And, I think any law enforcement officer understands what I'm about to say. When you're on patrol and you come across let me back up, the saying that the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. In law enforcement, we know that there's generational families out there that are dysfunctional. And you have, if you've been in the game long enough, you have locked up grandfather, father, child. And one of the things that kind of caught me, was I can remember on patrol hearing a certain last name. And you knew, hey, go ahead and check for warrants, right? And chances are you're going to have one. The kind of the wiring for being able, or the wiring of dysfunctionality carries over generational. And I thought, my goodness, here we have a scientific approach that can basically rewire, work with parents, if the institutions are able to do so, and save the children to be able to break that kind of generational violence that we see by the learned, parenting skills or the lack of environment, the lack of parenting skills that carries on. And for me, it was kind of eye-opening because we always focus, I think, in law enforcement. There is one that comes to mind, and a lot of our officers, we focus on junior high, we focus on high school. By design, we're not really good at elementary. I mean, other than, the trunk or treat and stuff like that, the high five, but the actual real meat of interaction, so to speak. We don't interact a lot with elementary age kids or those that are in kindergarten or even earlier ages. Institutionally, though, I think that this is very important. We definitely deal with the headache and the problem by the time they get into junior high because of some of these factors here. So, can you discuss with us a little bit about that generational cycle of violence?
Yes. So, children learn by modeling, adults model behaviors for them. So, it's interesting when, I have a parent say, oh, my husband and I don't fight. We don't, we don't do that in front of the children. No, and you don't know why that child is slamming doors when they're walking away from you or,
Right.
We're modeling that and they're picking up on those behaviors. So, that's one thing, but also understanding that we don't get a whole lot of training in parent education, right? Mississippi State does have a parenting course. That's not typical for many universities. And, we spend all this time preparing for careers, but one of our most valuable assets and biggest jobs is to actually help lay the foundation for that next generation, right?
Right.
But we don't spend a lot of time preparing to take on that role. And so that means many times parents are just using what happened to them. And, that's how they knew what to do. And people are afraid. We really have to make parent education something that is not labeled as you're a bad parent, so you need to go get this, because there's so much science that's happening. There's things that we're learning every day that everybody can learn from.
No doubt. In the research I learned as a father, and I'm speaking as a father, I read in some of this, I was going, wow, I messed up here, I messed up there. There's a lot of things there that, and TBRI is applicable to so much. For Mississippi in particular, you mentioned the ability to get parental training to be able to kind of teach some standards. I know that we've had specifically Mount Pilger local churches that have done those parental outreaches. And to be honest, the feedback was it was tough to get people involved. They just didn't care or didn't know what they needed, whatever the case might be, but that participation wasn't there. So from an institution standpoint, we got to be able to wake up. We have, I think, Child Protection Services is who brought it to my attention that TBRI is real and it's very working. Here's how it plays in Mississippi. You mentioned earlier something, and I don't want our viewers to think, oh, it's just, children with violent past. That's not my baby boy, baby girl. Here's where the vulnerable adults and trauma comes in, throws me, if you've got people that have had children to witness a divorce, guess what? Your child has been exposed to some trauma. If you are in a poverty state, it can impact the environment of the child. In Mississippi, we're running a very high poverty rate. And, Jeff and I were talking earlier. I mean, it's all categories all over the state of Mississippi. You run into a poverty rate. And so their Christmas is different for children. My heart always goes out to that. And I think a lot of our viewers, it applies. It's different when you are a child growing up in poverty versus a child that's not. And it is its own type of laws that are against you. But I'll reference this real quickly to one of our own employees. I'm not going to mention her name, but she grew up in a high crime area we had here. And TBRI is the first thing I thought of. How was it that she was successful, even as a young adult, raising a child in an extremely high crime area, yet two her neighbors to the right, to the left, or, either in prison or in the cemetery, right? How did she make it? Where's the consistency there? Well, I knew her mother, and you touched on something. I knew when she cried, I know enough character. Her mother passed away recently, and God bless her, but her mother responded with that cry. Her mother provided that institutional core values that I think really is one of those success patterns to get through. I don't know how TBR applies to success, and I'll leave it to you to talk about. But when I started reading about TBRI, I was really dialed in that I know her relationship with her mom was strong. I know her values were there. I know that while they didn't have a lot, she had that consistency of good sleep, good eating, and a safe environment. And I'll leave it to you to expand upon that.
Yes, well, I think that's what is so fascinating about TBRI is that it brings hope to situations where you may not see a lot when you're looking from the outside, right?
Right.
We know that there's higher rates of all kinds of negative outcomes when you come from a lower income area, and especially seeing violence around you. But the research shows that if you even just have one adult who absolutely loves you and adores you, and you know that it can protect you from those adversities actually becoming toxic to your body and rewiring your brain and nervous system. So it's the connection in those relationships. And this is also interesting, and I think speaks to that broader community aspect that we're getting to, is that, the parent-child relationship is central and core because that is the main relationship that a baby is going to have, right? But as they age, they have interactions with all different systems. So school, that person could be a teacher. That person could be the police officer down the road. all of us have a role in being able to build some of that connectedness. So even if a child's in that location and their parents are not able to give them that support, if they're able to get it from other people as well that they are interacting with, it can make a huge difference in how that brain and body is wired.
How do we institutionalize TBRI, meaning making it a Mississippi? I was talking to Jeff earlier. Mississippi's not a state, it's a club. We're a small population, right? Everybody knows everybody. We're still the only state where somebody asks, hey, where you're from? Do you know so-and-so? Right? You don't do that in Georgia. You don't do that in Texas, only in Mississippi. Well, I think that while that can sometimes be a liability against us, I think also it could be an asset. So when we stumble across something like the silver bullet of TBRI, from your standpoint, from your expertise, how do we institutionalize this? How do we make it a part of what we do when we raise our children in Mississippi? What would be, let's say it's Governor State, all right? And, or Lieutenant Governor, how do you address this? What steps do you take what areas do you address to make this where it needs to be?
So I really think like public health messages, number one, about that we do have some control over this, that there are ways that we can either prevent a lot of these violent occurrences, particularly with our youth, or that we can actually heal from situations that have been very traumatic. I think that that's pretty powerful, but I also think that when you have organizations who are also trauma-informed, so for instance, you mentioned CPS really brought this to you. The commissioner is very much, she's very focused on bringing TBRI to obviously foster parents, biological parents in the system. But one of the things that she recognized was that, you know, we need our institutions to also trust each other. We need the people within that to trust each other. And so really she's having all of CPS be trained in TBRI because it's not just about a parent-child relationship. This is the science behind how every interaction that we have with another human impacts us. And so when you know that, and then you realize that there's so much more healing that can be done, and that can be done on a wide spectrum as well. But, you know, you have to be able to bring people along on the journey. And I will say TBRI causes you to be very reflective on yourself, maybe your own parenting, maybe what those triggers are for what makes you upset, you know, like we call it flipping your lid, because when people have been under a lot of adversity, the amygdala tends to be bigger and it can actually kick off your prefrontal cortex offline. So when, you know, you have a shortened fuse and when you push somebody, it kind of flips that top part of your brain offline and really throws in that fight, flight, or freeze system. And so when people understand that and know the reasons behind behavior and can understand how you can actually calm down a child in a different way, you know, it makes it better for everybody. And so I think like small messages, making sure that everyone becomes trauma informed, particularly realizing that, you know, healing happens through relationships and that if we learn how to respond in ways that provide connection instead of disconnection, that it can really change, you know, our everyday lives, but also how we interact across different contexts.
No doubt. Talk to us about the tenets of TBRI. And Jeff, I'm just dominating. I'm stepping all over your subjects over there. So jump in at any time with this. So my apologies for that. But leave our viewers what the core components of TBRI are.
Okay.
And then we'll step into protect and connect.
Okay. So TBRI is focused, again, like you said, on attachment. So connection is the most important thing. No one is going to trust you or listen to you if you don't have that connection first. So there's lots of ways that you can do that. Some of that's through eye contact. Some of that may be through healthy touch. And so TBRI gives you skills to be able to meet that connection. And really, you need to be able to do that before you can correct behavior. So that works better for that to be the first piece. The second piece is really, we call it empowering, but it's about the environment. So we know, for instance, our emotions are going to be all over the place if we are hangry or if we are thirsty. So, TBRI gives that structure of every 2 hours, you need to make sure that a child's drinking water and having a snack to keep their blood sugar up. Things like that, small things that you can do in the environment to actually prevent some of those behavior meltdowns.
And sleep is
Yes.
part of empowerment, correct? Yeah.
Yes, sleep is definitely part of empowerment. I think we can all speak to, if we have not had good sleep, that our fuse is really small and we can definitely spiral out of control, especially a child. Providing that sleep routine. So it really is the structure kind of component. And then finally, you get to correction of behavior. And really, one of the things that TBRI teaches you is, number one, you don't need to come at every misbehavior with an elephant gun, right? Like sometimes it's just annoying little gnats.
Sure.
So recognizing that there are different levels of correction that you can do, and always trying to start out in a kind of playful way, because when it's playful, it doesn't trigger your brain to be like, uh-oh,
Right.
So you're able to actually interact with people and get a message across in a more simplistic way.
So being a drill instructor, based on your background of being a recruit, that's not the proper parental and tracking.
No, that's not going to be the first step.
Aggressive approach.
Yeah, no doubt. So talk to us about Protect and Connect.
So Protect and Connect actually is a subscription-based extension program. It came out of necessity in 2020. So obviously I do a lot of parent education, but in the pandemic, we couldn't meet in person. So we were really trying to figure out, how do we meet the need of getting this information to parents? And so one of the ways that we did that was through subscription boxes. So we actually took some of this really complex science and tried to put it into smaller chunks that people could actually pick up and use. So for instance, if a parent signs up for the program, they get to select one of 4 different developmental ages. So what age their child is. So infant, toddler, preschool, school age, and teens. So for instance, for the infant, we know that sleep is important and that SIDS, for instance, is a dangerous situation.
Yes, it is.
And so we provide a onesie, and on the back it says "Roll me over" for safe sleep. So it's small little messages that can kind of nudge parents to remember some of those like safety issues. So each of the developmental boxes has something that speaks to safety, to connection. So there's games, there's books. We put really quality toys in there, like Melissa and Doug toys, that we teach parents how you can use that to meet developmental milestones. So we tell them specifically what they can do. And after they get the developmental toolkit, then the rest of the boxes are really curated for multiple ages. So the second subscription box that comes is about positive guidance. So it's really providing parents with those tools other than spanking that can actually redirect behavior. And we show them how you can apply that for a really young kid, but also for a teenager. And so recognizing,
Big difference.
yes, that those should change as children get older. You've got to change your approaches, and that's not always easy. The third toolkit is emotion regulation and self-care. So, we can't pour from an empty cup. That saying is true. So, you've got a lot of parents out there struggling to make ends meet, maybe working multiple jobs, have, multiple children. It's a lot of stressors. And so recognizing that you will never be the best parent you can be if you don't also take care of yourself. So it's a balance. And to remind parents, your kids are watching you. They're learning how to cope with emotions and things as well as take care of themselves by that modeling. And then the fourth toolkit is actually about family communication. So we created some conversation cards, so questions that family members can ask each other. Some of them are intergenerational, so you can talk to granddad or, mom about these questions. Others are for co-parents because we recognize that not all families' biological parents are not always going to be within the same household. But even if they are, everybody needs to be on the same page. So what that sleep environment looks like at one parent's house needs to mirror at the other parent's house. What rules you have, those kinds of things. Yes. And then the fifth and final toolkit is actually about family resource management. So not only learning how to manage your finances and some examples of how you can teach children about saving, spending, giving kind of aspects, but also managing your time and your resource as a family. So making sure that, your child's not in so many extracurricular activities that they never have downtime, or you never get to spend time as a full family.
Yeah. Everybody's staring at a cell phone in the living room and nobody's talking. Right?
Exactly.
We just hit some people there. Yeah.
Exactly.
No doubt. Yeah.
Yes.
Making quality time. Yeah. I get that.
How much does this program cost to families?
So it's actually free to anyone in Mississippi. So you can sign up. We are funded through Mississippi Department of Human Services. And yes, so anybody in the state of Mississippi is eligible.
That just really makes it available to anyone.
So how do you access these packages? Where do you go to apply for them?
So we have a website that's TIPPS. So the homepage will actually take you directly to the registration page for Protect and Connect. So the email address is www.tipps.extension@msu.edu.
I'm so impressed. It's late at night and you've been teaching all day. That's, what you passed the test there. That's pretty good.
I hope I got that right. Yes.
No doubt. And anybody can put in the application. Let's say you're,
Yes.
It's a poverty family. It's not necessarily going to get online and do this registry. If you know of somebody that can benefit from it, you can take those steps and get these packages out, correct?
Yes. We have flyers around town, the local schools, multiple schools throughout the state. We've also put those into food bags that are given out at different places. Also, places like Sally Kate Winters. So there's lots of brochures and things out there that people can use as well.
Excellent. Well, listen, in closing, what would you like to leave with our viewers? What's the message for TBRI? What's the message for Protect and Connect in your terms?
So I think TBRI really is a journey that we all can go on that really can make a difference in not only a child's life, but also your own, whether that be, within your workplace or within your own home. It's something that I've learned a lot from, even though I've been studying this for 25 years or more. And so it's something that really puts a lot of things together for us. And we do offer free TBRI parenting courses. So you can also contact me at les456@msstate.edu for more information on how you can actually get TBRI trained yourself. And for Protect and Connect, I really think prevention is important. And again, trying to break down that barrier of parent education being for people who are involved in the court system and whatnot. There's a lot of new data out there that we need to know as parents. And I think most of us want the best for our children, and you don't know what you don't know. right?
No doubt. But thank you for being our guest this evening. We'll wrap it up. And thank you all for listening to The Guardian, a law enforcement podcast.